Close your eyes for a moment. Back. Lesson 5 feels almost like a new course after the interruption. Lesson 5, Aparigraha. I mentioned before, I noticed the similarities between Sanskrit and European languages, Dutch, English. Graha is one of those words that in English is grabbing, and in Dutch is grijpen. Dutch is a very funny language. Grijpen. Aparigraha is non-grabbing, non-grasping, but just grabbing something, not in that meaning of the word, but desire, having a strong desire for something. Like with the other yamas that we discussed, desire, if it is controlling you subconsciously, instinctively, leads to a distortion of energy, a tension, a field of tension that is not positive, on the contrary. So, when you're full of desire, people feel that, and it turns them away. Especially as women, you know that feeling when a man is looking at you full of desire, right? It's disgusting. It's creepy. But it doesn't only apply in that situation. It applies to everything. When you are ambitious towards your career, towards building a career, towards your future, desire, first and foremost, is a necessity. It is an instinct to survive. Desire has a function to help us provide for ourselves, our basic needs. So desire is not necessarily a bad thing, like all the other issues that we discussed. But desire becomes a bad thing when it controls us, when we become a slave of it. Usually this happens when we are functioning subconsciously. And most people, frankly, do function subconsciously. Often until you start practicing yoga. It's that you start becoming aware of it. That's also why it's so important that we discuss these subjects. So when you have a desire towards excelling in your career, climbing the career ladder, or a desire to become rich, That desire in itself, the feeling, affects people in a very negative way, wanting people to turn away from you. And not only that, if that desire is subconsciously controlling you, it leads to actions that break all the previous yamas that we have discussed. It leads to violence, it leads to lying, it leads to stealing, it also leads to unchaste behavior. So if we're not in control of the final yama, we violate all the previous yamas. There is a huge difference between obtaining our goals in life by sheer effort, by using hope instead of greed, wanting, and of course by putting in the time that is required to achieve what we want to achieve. Normally, people, when they want something, they don't want to have it tomorrow, they want to have it yesterday. And that is where the tension comes in. If you understand how this works, you too, as a yogi, will feel that desire and the hurry to fulfill that. But you know how it works, so you say to yourself, it needs time, I have to be patient. 2, I need to work for this. I need to follow the logical steps that will eventually, someday, lead to where I want to be, to what I want to have. So the concept of grit comes to mind. G-R-I-T, you understand what grit means? That means long-term, consistent effort. For years, not for days, not for weeks, for years. As an example, you see people who are successful. They have become successful in their profession. And with that success often comes material wealth. They can buy a nice house, drive a nice car, etc. So we envy that and we want to achieve that too. Now look around and be honest. Are there people in their 20s, in their 30s, who are successful? Generally not. People that have become successful in their field, there are always exceptions to the rule, of course. There are always some exceptions. Generally, the majority of the people that have reached success in life, that have reached their goal in life, they are in their 50s and older. Why? They spent 30, 35, even 40 years pursuing their goal. Very steadily and very consistently. That is how you achieve your goals. Without stepping on toes, without harming other people, without breaking all the previous yamas. So we like to replace wanting with wishing or hope. You understand the difference between the two? Wanting is graha. Wanting is this desire that is surrounded by tension, and that leads to conflict, that leads to separation rather than union. It leads to people trying to avoid you. Hope, however, is in your heart. So hope, although it seems the same as wanting, is actually the opposite. Wanting becomes an obstacle and restricts the energy circulation, which people translate into a negative feeling. Hope in your heart opens up the energy channels and makes energy flow. and people feel that as a positive quality. But hope is automatically, because one thing is in the lower chakra, instinct, hope is in the higher chakra, is automatically accompanied by patience. Because hope from the crown chakra expressed through the heart is a messenger of the crown chakra. Hope is located in the center where vision, intuition, wisdom are all located. So if you are capable of hope, it is automatically accompanied by vision that gives you the insight that there is a process that cannot be skipped unless you are willing to commit violence and lie and steal, etc. So you clearly, intuitively, deep inside your mind, you know that there is a long road that you need to follow to get where you want. That is hope. Wanting means that you can get things done yesterday, but it leads to so much mayhem. Once you become aware of that, you cannot function like that anymore. You leave so much hurt in your wake of pursuing your goals. You can see in society, in the people around you, or if you watch certain series on Netflix or TV, you can observe how people function and how they interact, and you can see exactly how this works. The people that cause revulsion, resistance, are the people that are not bound by the universal laws like the Yamas. The people that feel attractive are the people that do function in accordance with those universal laws. So I've had a period in my life that I had no TV. That was long before the internet. For years I didn't have a TV because it sucked my energy out. But then when I acquired the TV again, my TV watching totally changed to what it was before. It just becomes a learning experience every time again. And I'm only interested in things that feel real. Documentaries, the news, I find news very important, just to be connected with what is happening in society and around the world. And certain, since Netflix actually for the first time in 45 years, I started watching series again. But only those that are no nonsense, only those that have real life stories. Because as soon as I have a feeling that something is unrealistic, is overdone, is basically just nonsense, I can't watch it, I can't focus on it. It's totally, I have no interest in something like that. But if you watch it from such a perspective, it's very interesting to see how everything works. That's yoga too. Talking about the media, TV, but also, these days everything is of course internet based. That is of course one of the factors in our lives that can trigger desire. That can trigger desire in such a way that it becomes poisonous. We are beyond the stage that we have to survive and provide our daily meals. So desire has fulfilled the task of us laying a foundation. We live in a pretty stable and wealthy society where all the basic needs are met. Your desire has not disappeared with that. So it just starts to focus subconsciously, in most cases, on other things, and very often superficial things. Now when you talk about Aparigraha, about the practice of non-desire, that does not mean to be extreme and deny yourself everything in life. That is not the point. Some yogis do that, especially in beginning stages, become kind of fanatic, extreme, radical. But the point about discussing these issues is not to deny, in this case, desire, but to first and foremost become conscious of it. And then, based on that consciousness, to start playing with it. Because first thing that you become aware of is how it affects you in a negative way when you have a desire. So the next thing that you then do is to determine for yourself how important that desire is. Because desire has a function. Don't forget about that. It has an important, an essential function in our lives. It tells us there is a need for something. In case of food, that is important. In case of warmth, that is important. In case of safety, that is important. But when your desire is triggered by an expensive accessory, for example, then you need to ask yourself, do I really need this? If you can afford it, you can say to yourself, I don't really need it, but I can afford it. So why not just enjoy this object of my desire? If it is something that you can't afford, but it is essential for your life, then you find ways to pursue it. Food, shelter, the basic needs of life. Desire is designed to trigger you into behavior that makes you obtain those basic needs. But when it comes to luxury, when it comes to issues that go beyond our basic needs, you simply start playing with it. Do I need it? No, not really? Okay, let's see if I can do without it. I try to do without it. The desire is still very strong. Okay, can I afford it? Okay, then let's just obtain whatever it is that my desire goes out to and just enjoy it. Interestingly, from my experience, looking back to my childhood also, when strongly desiring a certain toy, I have noticed, often, not always, that when really wanting something that is like a toy is not a basic necessity, the interest after obtaining the object very soon disappears. So the toy ends up in a corner and your mom tells you, see, I told you you are not going to play with it anyway. But there are also things in life. I'm very austere because my mom raised me very austere, living in a big family. So there was no room for luxury. So I'm very austere. That's my basic behavior. So it can happen that I'm wearing a coat that is 8 years old. It just starts to fall apart. I don't mind, I don't care. I also don't care what other people think about it. It keeps me warm. That's a basic necessity, a basic need. But then someday, there comes a day that I allow myself to buy a new coat. You know what happens? Because I have been practicing non-desire for 7, 8, sometimes 12, I've had a coat for 12 years. I'm in heaven with the new coat. Every time I put it on, I think, wow, that zipper, that is really smooth, and oh, it feels so comfortable, and you know, that is a spiritual experience. I once needed a walk. That was in the beginning of my coming to Korea, and I needed a walk, a pen, and I looked every shop that was selling pens. I would look at the pens. I really needed it, But every pen that I looked at, it didn't feel right for some reason. Just flimsy or not. And then one day, after months and months of looking for that wok at Carrefour, which was in Korea until the early 2000s, then they left. At Carrefour, I found a very, I saw it from a distance and I was drawn to it. I took it from the rack and I still have that pen, 25, almost 20 years later. Every time I use it, I feel like being in heaven. It's very good quality. It's not even a brand, it's made in Korea, but absolutely good quality. Everything about that pen makes sense. Desire, use it so that it brings you to heaven. If you have everything you need and you keep acquiring more, it has no function anymore. Especially not on a higher level. Just to give you some examples, I do this with everything. My shoes, I only throw them away when they are totally falling apart. Then I buy new ones and I realize, oh my God, in those 5 years or so, technology has improved so much. It's just amazing. And you enjoy so much. If you have 10 pairs of shoes and you buy an 11th pair of shoes, it has no function anymore. So in this way, you can make yoga out of everything that you do in life, including playing with your desires. Desire can also make you sick. If you look at children, babies can actually die if their basic needs are not met. You can feed them, but if you only feed them without any other nourishment, like warmth, like love, like affection, babies can actually die from a lack of it. The same thing actually was happening with Bobby, my second dog, the sister of the first dog. Because they grew up together for the first year of their life and then were separated, Pada ran away from his new home to go back to the shelter. Bobby became depressed and didn't eat anymore. And I'm convinced that if I hadn't taken her from the shelter, she would have died. And they were actually just waiting for her to die. They didn't take her out of the cage. This is about desire. She wanted to be back with Pada. Pada wanted to be back with her, so he ran away. They were both so disrupted, so unsettled. And nobody understood. Nobody understood that they had to be together or should not even have been separated in the first place. For me, that became very clear. As soon as I understood their background, and like I said before, people thought I was crazy when I took the first dog, and even more so when I took the second one. But for me, there was no doubt about it. They just had to be together. This is like a holy duty. Seeing their suffering, you cannot not take action. Maybe like with the last course, I will take them to class in the last class. Because it's a lot of work to, so I cannot bring them every class, but in the last, you have to see them. They are so lovely, they're so great, just amazing. It's very difficult to pet them. I can touch them, I can cuddle them, but other people, if they approach, they have this instinctive fear, always avoiding other people. Desire can make people sick. It can even make people die. We're talking about not a desire for jewelry or desire for a nice car, but we're talking about deep, basic needs like love, like affection, like warmth. Try to be aware of how the marketing world tries to manipulate your desires into getting a new coat. You know, you look for a coat on the internet just once. Every day, every website that you open is accompanied by advertisement of coats. You look at some kind of hiking shoes only once, and from that day on, every day you get advertisements of hiking shoes. Very tricky. They're just getting under your skin and manipulating you into buying something that you might not really need. Try simply to be aware of that, and most importantly, Aparigraha means refusing to go along with that. Yeah, talking about dogs and children. As parents or owners of dogs, we want our children or our pet to behave in certain ways. That is, of course, important, that is necessary. But we have to be careful that we do not project our ambition onto our dog or onto our children, because that is a negative manifestation of desire. Let me give you an example of this. I had my studios in this huge gym next to 63 building here in Yoido, and one day a pretty tall elementary school girl came to my class, Yubin. And she started coming to class every morning at 7 o'clock. But I noticed that she hated being there. So at some point I just asked her after the class, "Hey, Yubin, why do you come to this class?" And she said, "My dad wants me to." And then she explained the whole story, that her dad is a physical education teacher, and she is the first daughter. She's the first child. So this family has 2 children, both of them are daughters. The father, being an ambitious sportsman, he wished that he had a son. So he projected all his ambition on his first daughter. Some people even go so far to give their first child, if it is a daughter, a boy's name, just out of frustration that it isn't a boy. Very sad, actually. So she explained to me that her father wanted her to become Kukkadepyo, which is a national representative. Korean people know exactly what it means. National representative of the Korean ski team. So every winter for 3 months she would go to Pyeongchang or in the mountains, and the main focus, apart from education, is skiing every day. This girl was only 11 years old or so, and it was really sad. It was breaking her apart. She hated everything that her dad told her to do, but there was one thing that she really liked. Now I'll show you what it looked like when Yubin was in the yoga class. forward bend. Triangle pose. Then, 8 o'clock, the class is finished. So 10 minutes after 8, I walk out the building and I go home. I look around and I see Yubin with her backpack on the way to school. So happy. So totally different energy. The father's desire, ambition of his girl, who he wanted to be a boy, and who he wants to be eventually a national star, destroyed this girl. And I'm pretty sure she never became Kukatapyo, she never became a top skier, and I'm pretty sure that she's very, very unhappy, broken as a result of this. So it's a very extreme example, very sad. And before you end up in such an extreme situation, there are many subtle ways that we project our ambition, our desire, upon our pet or on our child. It can even lead to abuse, where you hit your dog or you hit your child for not cooperating with what you want them to do. And it often leads to more distorted behavior. Okay. Questions? If you find it a difficult issue to apply at first, like with the other yamas, start applying it in your yoga practice. There are also many yoga teachers, you know, that expect a perfect pose from you. And when you are not capable of making a perfect pose, they show their dissatisfaction. Sometimes even to the point that they humiliate you. How can you be a yoga teacher and then behave like that? It shows they haven't learned yoga, actually. It's only human. It's only human. As a yoga teacher, you should know better. How do you approach this? Play. Play with your exercises. You have a desire to practice yoga? Practice yoga. Show grit. Practice every day if possible. Do your exercises. But go with the flow. Do not expect you to be a super yogi from day one. Because that is really not what yoga is about. On the contrary, if you approach yoga in that way, it does the opposite of what yoga tries to achieve, which is freeing up energy, unblocking the energy circulation. That desire, if not canalized in proper ways, with proper flexibility and playfulness, leads to a new blockage. And blockages in the long term lead to disease. So do your exercises and try to do it right. But when you feel pain, when you feel dissatisfaction, or start being negative about yourself and your own abilities, there you have to be conscious of what is happening and step in and smile and take a deep breath and let it go. Then you see after 2 weeks, after 4 weeks, after 6 weeks, hey, I kept practicing and now I start feeling some improvements. That is where your reward is. Your reward is in those little improvements, not in a perfect pose. Perfect pose always, first of all, perfection is an illusion. If I am, you know, there is a Yehudi Menuhin. You know Yehudi Menuhin? not many people know, but he's a very old man. I don't know if he's still alive. He actually wrote a foreword in the Light on Yoga. He was a virtuose violin player, a master violin player, who also liked yoga. So he wrote a foreword in the book Light on Yoga. In this book, he wrote a foreword. Anyway, Yehudi Menuhin, he's played violin for 85 years of his life, since childhood. So when you listen to his playing, it's perfect. But Yehudi Menuhin, the perfect violin player, says, yeah, but every time I play, there is something not right about it. There was a tone off, Perfection is in the eye of the beholder. If I do a pose, you may think it's perfect. I know deep inside that there's some room for improvement. So it's endless. You only make yourself sick if you practice things, not only yoga, but everything in life, with such an approach. There is no perfection. Perfection is simply in the eye of the beholder. So play. And when you understand how that works in yoga, it integrates into your daily life. How you deal with your work, how you deal with your relationships, and everything else. Play with your desire. Allow yourself desire, but be conscious of how it can cause you to end up in trouble. Either financially, because you draw your credit card, or because you obtain things by hurting other people, by violating the previous 4 yamas: non-violence, non-lying, non-stealing, and non-unchaste behavior. So play. And when you make a mistake, do not rub it in. Simply be aware of it. Because making mistakes is part of the process that allows you to grow. From the moment that you start being conscious of the mistakes that you make, that is where you are starting to grow quite rapidly. You end up on a very dynamic path of personal growth, development. So play. We have a tendency, when we make mistakes, when we fail, to beat ourselves up over the failure, over the imperfection, over the mistakes. That is a natural reaction. Every human being, because of ego, will react in the first instance like that. The yogi then oversees what is happening and steps in. And you go into a conversation with yourself. And you try to understand why it happened. What happened and why did it happen? And that is where mastership starts. The true warrior is the warrior that conquers without fighting. The yogi, we live in a world where the image of yoga has become totally distorted. Yoga is new age, yoga is for hippies, yoga is whatever. Yoga is soft for softies. That's why you see only 2 men here. 3 men, sorry. Tenzin is hiding somewhere. But yoga is making you a warrior. Because the real warrior is not the person that needs a gun or a sword. Because there you make all the shortcuts that lead to so much karma, so much disruption. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. And I think it was the Chinese general Sun Tzu who said exactly this. The real warrior, the real general, wins wars without a fight. By being smart, by being clever, by anticipating the enemy's steps. And only when unavoidable, some battles will be needed, but as little as possible, as short as possible. The yogi becomes a warrior, but the warrior in the heart. You know the word jihad? Jihad? Jihad is a holy war, right?
Social revolution, I think, actually.
What?
Moral revolution.
Yeah, no, but listen, there are many people in this world where the concept of jihad is being used as an excuse to kill people. Terrorism is committed under the guise of jihad. But jihad is exactly this. It is the battle between the head and the heart. Yoga has also a jihad that is described in the book, the Bhagavad Gita, which on a surface looks like a book about war, bloody war, people cutting off each other's heads, chariots, with warriors with spears and bows and swords. But it is symbolical language. Between the lines you read, it is a story about the conflicts, internal conflicts that all of us go through in life. And in the Islam, jihad is exactly that. When you cut other people's heads off under the excuse of jihad, that doesn't make you a warrior. It makes you a criminal. You are blaming your internal struggles on other people and you kill them for it. Your internal conflicts you project onto other people. A real jihad and the Bhagavad Gita, and I think all philosophies and all religions have this concept, is really about how internally you process all those conflicts without harming others in a harmonious way, leading to personal growth and development. And that's what it's really about. That is the real war. That is the real tough girl or the real tough guy. That is the one that doesn't need a gun or a sword. Okay? Questions? Okay, let's have a short break. 5 minutes.